Okay, that first video, I'm uploading it currently, and it's going extremely slowly, so we may or may not be able to upload these videos today, which is Saturday. It might be another day, or maybe if I get into a better spot later where there's, I guess, a better connection, then maybe we can get that uploaded. Okay, so in this video, part 18 of the Primordial Theology series, I want to revisit my initial video way back. One of my first videos I did for this channel after leaving Christianity was on evil, and I believe I mentioned there that I still agreed with the Christian view that evil is essentially non-existent. In other words, it doesn't have positive existence. It doesn't have being really of any sort. It's just the deprivation of the good, or yeah, something of that nature. I described it as the deprivation of the good. Essentially, it's a negative rather than a positive. I would counter that now by saying that it is, in fact, it does in fact have a real existence, and it is actually natural to our being. It's part of our very being. It's part of our existence. When we come into being as individuals, we embody a light side and a dark side. This is very common in certain non-dual schools of thought. It's very common in esotericism, and it's common in Carl Jung's psychological teachings, his teaching on psychology and various I forgot it now. I lost it. But anyway, yeah, Carl Jung talks about it a great deal. I would actually recommend looking at Carl Jung, studying him in more detail. I think he has a lot out there that is of great benefit if you can understand what he's talking about. He can be a little bit difficult, but it's well worth diving deep on him. But when I talk about evil, I don't mean I'm not talking about things like law breaking or maliciousness, acting out of malice towards others, or just being in a general state of rebellion or opposition. I am, although that can be an expression, albeit an unhealthy one, of the natural evil, quote unquote, that exists within us that I'm going to talk about. There is a more natural or primordial, quote unquote, evil, which I would prefer to speak of in terms of the dark. There's the dark and the light. And to be a whole and balanced human being, in order to accomplish that, we have to integrate those two things, not cut one or the other off and pretend that it's not there. And what I'm going to use Christians as an example because I used to be one, and so I can speak with experience. That way I'm not just projecting assumptions onto Christianity without knowing what I'm talking about. I'm going to use Christianity because I lived it and breathed it from the time I was a baby until just a few years ago at the age of 42. There is a strong tendency, and it's also very common, for Christians who deny that evil has a positive existence to repress and suppress certain aspects of their own nature and being, certain aspects of their own personality that need to have healthy expression and a healthy outlet so that they can be integrated into the totality of their being, such that you can act and think and feel in a healthy way. But instead, they repress and suppress certain darker aspects of themselves because of this unconscious belief. I mean, it's conscious, but it's unconscious when they go about suppressing and repressing certain elements of themselves. They unconsciously suppress and repress those things because they can't live with the idea that there is a darkness within. It's too frightening to them. But what that does, we all know that suppressing and repressing ourselves can be very, very unhealthy. We know that it can even lead to physical and medical problems. So the position I'm taking now is that the dark comes out in a more natural and primordial way in things like fear or anger and violence. Those things I no longer see as a product of a fall the way the Christians would. I believe that we came into existence, we human beings anyway. There are other beings, I believe, and we're going to get into that in the next video, but other beings in other dimensions, and I think that they start out in other dimensions. I think there are intelligences that start out in different dimensions, depending on their nature. And again, we'll cover that next time. But we humans, I'm going to speak for we humans, started out here on this planet or some other planet, nearby planet or what have you, in the physical realm, in this third dimension. And we began to experience certain things as the natural and normal environment or natural and normal condition of our existence that the Christian does not see as natural and normal. They see it as a product of a fall, so as something unnatural. When we were first manifest, death was, I believe, a natural, mortality was a natural function of our being, of being members of this, of this world, this planet. And there's fear that naturally goes with that when your life is threatened, for example. And so certain I'm not finding the right word right now, but certain natural reactions kick in. Fear kicks in. Fear is supposed to kick in because it's your natural survival mechanism. You go into survival mode, and then that leads to violence, right? Self-defense. In a world where there's naturally competition, or where you're being hunted, you're hunting for your food, or you're being hunted as food. Fear kicks in. That's an important part of being alive, being in this world. Fear has to kick in order for the survival instinct to kick in. And anger is that, anger also triggers that natural instinct for survival and other instincts. So I think I don't see those things as inherently sinful. I don't see them as products of a fallen world. I see those things as things we must grapple with as part of our natural state when first coming into existence, that we must, over time and over many incarnations overcome and conquer. And part of that conquering is probably the biggest part of that conquering is to learn how to integrate the dark and the light. If it's just light and no dark, people who want to just focus on the light rather than dark, I notice that they like to sort of overlook injustices. They don't like to think about war, things like that. They don't like to talk about politics, anything that's uncomfortable, anything that reeks of confrontation or I don't know, pain or struggle or challenges that have to be overcome through debate and conflict, which they also hate and fear. Those are the light and life people. You see that a lot among New Agers. That actually doesn't lead to the kind of balance we're looking for. It leaves injustice unresolved. Injustices are unresolved, and they like to sort of hide like an ostrich. They hide their head under the sand. They don't want to be the solution. They want to be the problem by passively doing nothing. So, we live in a world where evolution comes through struggle and through conflict and through war, and people cannot admit that. So that is one thing but of course there's the other side to this, where when we understand that, we can begin to start incorporating the dark and the light in a way that makes for a more a unified and healthy person. Obviously there's the extreme of that, which is like a might makes right. If I can get away with it, I'm going to do it. I live for number one. I'm going to acquire as much money as possible, as much property as possible, as much territory as possible, regardless of the consequences, regardless of what it may do to others. That would be a more extreme, very deleterious thing. Not just, to other individuals, it's bad for society as a whole. Society can't function in a unified way in that kind of environment. We also end up hurting ourselves because others begin to turn on us. It becomes dog eat dog, and that's what a kind of more what's the word? It's a form of government. Starts with an A. Anyway, I for whatever reason, it's not coming to mind, but that's the kind of thing that creates, is this total chaos. So just one way to illustrate, to give an example of what I'm talking about there as far as integrating the two. So when I say evil, I'm not talking about what I just mentioned. I'm talking about certain primordial aspects, certain darknesses that we live with from the time we're born, that are natural and important as long as we are applying them correctly and integrating them properly. And the failure to recognize that, and the failure to recognize the existence of our shadow, that we have a shadow, the failure to realize it needs to be integrated with the fullness of our being, again, leads to all sorts of terrible things. And the repression and suppression leads to all kinds of psychological, emotional, and physical symptoms that we would be better off without. So that is to address another video that I did early in this series, where I said that I wasn't entirely sure, but I was kind of leaning towards the idea that we started in a higher plane and descended I have taken a 180 turn on that, and I realize that that is not, that doesn't really make sense of reality the way this other position does. So that will do it for the topic of evil, and I'll come back and discuss my my new hypothesis, my new model of how the cosmos is structured in terms of the various dimensions, the heavens, the hells, where we stand, where the earth stands in relation to all of that. And also think of it as kind of an extension of this video as well. All right, thanks a lot. Have a great day. Have a good weekend.